What do you think the most important season is in Louisiana? It's not summer, it's not winter, spring or fall, but it's crawfish season. Starting around mid-January and running through about June. If you're Louisianian, you're ready for crawfish, and I got a great recipe for you. It's a creamy crawfish bisque. Not your classic dark roux Cajun bisque, but more of a French style. So let's jump in and get cooking. Of course, I got my favorite pan here, which is the cast iron, black iron Dutch oven, which I just love, but any heavy bottom pot will do. You need a heavy bottom because you want to make sure you can distribute your heat evenly and have no hot spots. And what I've done is I've started to melt a little bit of butter, and this is what we're going to use kind of as our base. Again, we're doing a French style bisque. Think like your classic French lobster bisque, but with some Louisiana influence. Once your butter's melted, we're ready to start adding some onions into here. Also got some green bell peppers and some garlic. Now, because we're working with butter, we're working kind of over a medium-high heat. Don't want to be all the way cranked up to high because we don't want to burn that butter, but we do want to start to get some good caramelization and some good saute right here on these vegetables. Once we have the vegetables nice and wilted, now we're going to go in with some flour. Just regular all-purpose flour. We're going to get that in there. And what the flour is going to do is start to pick up that butter. And this is your classic blonde French roux, which anytime we make a roux, we're using that to either thicken a soup or a sauce. So we get that in there, just enough to, it's going to pick up all that butter. We're also going to add some tomato paste. That goes in, and we're going to mix that into the roux mixture. And these are both of our thickeners. The tomato paste is going to add a little bit of richness, and it's going to help give it that beautiful kind of pink color, give it some flavor, and give it a little thickness to the soup as well. Get that all mixed in. Once we're at this point, we're ready to add our seafood stock. Now, we just had a crawfish boil, so I saved a little bit of that crawfish liquid left over after the boil. Added a little bit of water so it wouldn't be too spicy. And that makes just a wonderful stock. We're going to switch over to a whisk and get all this kind of mixed in. But I'm a big fan of, if you don't have access to your crawfish boil water, well, of course, you want to add some kind of flavored liquid in here for your soup anytime you're ever making a soup. So a great alternative is go into the market, and oftentimes in that soup aisle, they have oftentimes these boxed broths. They can be chicken broth, vegetable broth, beef broth, but oftentimes you'll see a seafood one as well, and pick that up, and that'll give it some perfect flavor. If they don't have that, feel free to use a vegetable broth or a chicken broth because that's going to have great flavor also. Now, anytime we're using a stock with a roux, we need it to come up to a boil for it to thicken. Roux doesn't work until it's come up to a boil in which it will start to thicken. Once we start to simmer, we want it to simmer for about 5 or so minutes. That's going to help all these flavors start to marry together and start to build, and we start to get some of that nice thickness. Now that that's happened, we're ready to start flavoring this. Because we're working again in that classic French realm, I got a little bit of tarragon. Dry or fresh will be fine, either one. A little bit of sherry I'm going to put in here, about a cup. And that's going to add great flavor as well. In French cooking, oftentimes when you have something that's creamy, it's oftentimes going to be flavored with sherry. That's a classic combination. But since we are here in Louisiana, we need some big, bold flavors. So I'm going to shake a little bit of Creole seasoning in here. Creole seasoning is, cayenne pepper, paprika, granulated onion, granulated garlic, and different herbs. And that's really going to kind of give this a bold, spicy, kind of fun flavor. And we're going to get that in there as well. Now, this is optional, but it's up to you. But if you like it kind of chunky and rustic, you're perfect at this point. But if you want it just a little more refined, a little more smooth, what we're going to do is we're going to go in here with an immersion blender and just puree this whole mixture. Now, if you don't have an immersion blender and you still want to puree this, just have a blender and working in batches. Put a little bit in, a lid on top with a rag on top to keep everything in there, and you can just pulse it a couple times with the blender, then return it back to the pot. Now, to finish this soup off, we already have it seasoned. We want to come in with a little bit of heavy cream. This is what's going to make it that classic French bisque by giving it just some richness. and just make it nice and creamy, and that's exactly what we're looking for. And then now we're ready to go in with the Louisiana crawfish. Again, this is a perfect soup when it's still kind of cold out and you can get the crawfish. Now, anytime we're talking about crawfish, you know, it can be purchased in these 1-pound bags that we love, and what I never want you to do is rinse it off. When you open it up, you want to keep everything in here because that's all flavor. That's just all those juices and fat or where so much of the flavor comes from. So the last thing you would want to do is just rinse that off and have it just go down the sink. So we're going to get the crawfish in there, and we just want to have the crawfish in the soup long enough to start to heat up the crawfish. We don't need this to cook too long because all the work's been done ahead of time. The crawfish are already cooked. So if we were to just boil these crawfish, we're just going to overcook our crawfish, and we want them just to stay nice and delicate. Man, look at that. Now, let me show you how we're going to serve this up. I like to start with a bowl. Get my bowl here. And then get a nice, healthy scoop of this crawfish bisque with plenty of crawfish tails. Then I come back with a little bit of sliced green onions right on top. And then another wonderful thing to add to mini soups, this included, is I like to float 1 or 2 croutons in here and let them just kind of soak up all those flavors. So we're going to get a couple of those croutons in there. And there you go, guys. A perfect crawfish recipe, a wonderful soup with a lot of our great French influences that we have in Louisiana found right here in this soup right here. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.